Right now, we're at absolute critical levels for Bitcoin. What happens next could really determine the next couple weeks or even months of a pattern, and we're right there at that pivotal point. So right now, as always, every day in crypto is an adventure. Today, we're going to talk about where we are exactly with Bitcoin. We're going to talk about XRP just a little bit because we have a very interesting pattern setting up for XRP as well, and what I think might happen next and what is happening right now with the tariffs. With that, let's get into talking about Bitcoin just for a minute here. We've got Bitcoin is at this absolute critical level. We've been traveling along on this downward descending panel right here, downward descending channel here, panel. And look at this, downward descending channel. We broke above this trend line. And right now, I mean, if you look at where we are, it's absolutely critical level. We're at an absolute critical level. If you can see that, let me zoom in a bit. And what I mean by that is that we bounced off this trend line. It's now become a floor of support, but we cannot pass this line right here. And really everything, we've wicked above the $86,000. I have this in green because when we get above that level of 86,000 on Bitcoin, I see very good things happening potentially because we have broken out of this pattern and it could potentially push up. But if we keep getting rejected at this $86,000 line, we could very easily push down. And what's going to cause this? What's the catalyst right now that's going to determine what happens next with Bitcoin? Because look, I mean, we've bounced off this line 1, 2, 3, 4 times, got rejected. We bounced way down low yesterday. And right now we're still trying to bounce above this trend line. Can't hold a candle above this trend line. Like I said yesterday, it needs a very intricate catalyst or a compelling event or reason to bounce above that. The narrative right now is 100% about the tariffs. You can't get away from the tariff talk. It is everywhere. But I find it very, very interesting exactly how they're talking about the tariffs, because if you Google latest tariff news, they talk 100% about China. I get it. China's the biggest narrative. It's our foe. It's our latest version of Russia from the USSR from the 80s. You know, it is our nemesis, and news outlets love a nemesis. They love a negative headline because negative headlines are shown to attract, to have a 49% more likelihood of reading a negative headline than a positive one. And if you look at all of these negative headlines, they're pointing to China 100%. But right now, one thing that is happening is if let's go a step further. Japan is setting off tariff talks in Washington right now. So there's going to be negotiations with Japan. Trump said he'd sit in on those, but Scott Bessent and Ludnick were going to be the ones probably negotiating that deal. I'm sure if Trump's in the room, he's going to chime in as well. But look at this. I mean, where does Japan stack in size of nations? And really, United States is number one, $27 trillion. We're probably to 30 trillion. This was 2023. Yeah, we're probably still 28, 29 trillion. China, 17 trillion. Germany, 4.5. Japan, number 4 biggest economy in the world, $4.2 trillion economy, is coming to the table to negotiate. And I'm sure it's going to be the rhetoric from Trump is going to be like, look, we defended you. You were our enemy in World War II, and since then we've propped you back up. We've put our military there. We've traded with you. We've allowed you to trade to us when we have a deficit, even though you're 5 times smaller, 6 times smaller country. And I'm sure that's going to be part of the narrative and to get Japan to loosen up trade in 2 ways, them to sell us but us to be allowed to sell to them without ginormous tariffs. So look, these narratives, United States is bigger than the next 4 biggest economies combined. It is a player, but this next piece of the negotiations have to be careful because we don't want to piss off our allies, but we don't want to get, we want to get better trade deals from what I understand. That all being said, not to get political, what is it going to do to Bitcoin? Well, if we have positive movement with Japan and we're moving in the right direction with China, because yesterday, China said that they would be open to talks with the United States as long as they're treated with respect. So maybe that's their way of saving face to getting back to the table, and which is good. I mean, we have a big contest going on of, who could withstand higher trade levels. And if you look at the news, they talk about stuff that doesn't really exist, but they say China to now pay up to 245%. And if you read the fine print, a lot of that is like small items. It's not everything across the board. It depends on the item and the amount of tariff. It's probably reciprocal of what they would do incoming to our goods. So that is, one of the things that it just keeps pushing up and up. And it sounds absurd, but there's countries that levy 300, 400, 500% tariffs on goods incoming into their country, which basically says don't bring them into our country. So we're not allowed to sell stuff there. But that being said, if this does get worked out, this is the catalyst that we need to push forward on Bitcoin. And, what about the other cryptos? Look, this is the last week. It's been a very green week for most people other than, obviously Mantra had a very, very terrible event on Saturday or Sunday. And I don't know if they will recover or not. I'm sure it's covered on a lot of other channels. Mantra is just not my bag. So I don't have much to say about it. And you look at what's going on, the best performer of the top 20 is Solana and XRP. XRP last week has been a top performer. If you look at performance of the top 20, XRP 14.19%, Solana 18.7% on Solana. So it's been a very good week for Solana to catch up. Now, other than that, nothing in the top 20. Bitcoin Cash 17% up, but really those are the three top performers. Bitcoin held in there strong, 8.47%. But really, I want to talk about XRP. I mean, XRP has been in this downward descending wedge since the same day that Bitcoin has been, which is basically right here, which is around inauguration time, right? It reached a recent high of around, what is that, $3.38 and change, maybe $3.40. And here we are. We're trading down here, and it's perfectly played in this wedge, and it's just consolidating. When is it going to break out? Well, I believe with all the positive news coming about XRP, it's really, again, also the tariffs. I mean, the tariffs are dominating the narratives out there. And if we can, and we have still been rejected 3-4 times, just like Bitcoin, can't hold a candle above this downward descending line. And so really, that's really what's up next. If we can get past that same catalyst, is it going to be, even if SEC formally drops all charges and they get to pay their fine and move on, it's still going to be dominated by the tariff. But man, that is like, you're just holding someone back, and then when you let them loose, they're going to go nuts. And that's how I feel. I could be wrong. This isn't financial advice. I'm not your financial advisor. But we are right at the precipice of a major, major breakout. It could be good, which would bounce through this line, maybe bounce off at one time and then head up. Or, with ongoing tariff talks, there's a point where, it's going to be tough to recover. If we go on another couple of months and we get down here, we could test the bottom limits of these levels. So we're in a very precarious point. That's why a lot of money is not in the game right now. A lot of the money is on the sidelines. You look at M2 supply. We've talked about it numerous times on this channel and all the other channels out there. The M2 supply is extraordinarily high. You're selling stocks, you're selling your bonds, you're selling your crypto, and you're holding cash waiting to see which direction the world's going to go, because that's going to determine where you put your money. Do I need to put it in a really safe place like bonds, or do I need to put it in a really risky place like crypto, or am I going to be somewhere in the middle like equities, or am I going to be hedged out amongst all those things? And I do believe a rising tide rises all ships, and I do believe that if we get past the tariffs, we're going to see that rising tide, and all ships will raise: equities, stocks, even bonds, real estate, possibly, but all these things, because the tariff's the big narrative that's dominating the networks, dominating the talks, dominating our economies. And right now today is Wednesday, April 16th. We're going to see a couple macroeconomic news pieces today. U.S. retail sales, that's really indicative of the sentiment of the American consumer and what they're thinking about. Because if they're purchasing, they feel good. But if these retail sales slump, it shows that there's a lessening demand because of worry about the economy. And that alone can send us into a recession. I don't know what we're going to see. Retail sales, industrial production. Here's the other big one today. Jerome Powell, the federal chair, speaks at 1:30 today. Now, typically his language is pretty mild. He doesn't want to upset anything, or because he knows that everyone's listening to every word he says, and it could definitely change markets. So I'm sure that'll be a very calculated speech with very little talk about monetary or fiscal or monetary policy that they can control of, rates and quantitative tightening and things like that. But you never know. He could signal something like, look, if the markets or if the inflation continues to show that it's moving in the right direction and the tariff talk starts to wind down, we're gonna act accordingly, or something like that. And if we see something like that, I don't think it's gonna move markets terribly unless he says, look, we're gonna do emergency cut. Then you're gonna see markets move initially, and they're gonna be scared initially because the emergency cut is not a good thing. That means that they can't wait till May to do something about the economy because it's in dire need. So that's not good. I mean, I know everyone wants the money printer to turn on so we all pump, but emergency policy would shake the markets. So I don't think he's going to do that today. I think it's going to be more very mild. Look, if things keep going this direction or that direction, we are ready to act. The Fed's ready to act. And if they say ready to act, it's going to be more impactful than if they say something else like, we'll look into it. But ready to act or something of that nature, that kind of language is going to play a bigger role. Now, that being said, there's a lot going on in the markets every single day. Stock market, whipsaw. I mean, the tariffs are still having a major effects on all the markets. But, at some point, it's the boy who cried wolf, where if you keep saying tariff, 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 it numbs you, and we see markets do what markets do. And that, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. We still need to get through this tariff talk because it is just dominating everything. And once we do, good, bad, or indifferent, it's going to move markets one way or another because they just want to know which way to go. One market will pump and another market will dump, or vice versa. We don't know until we know the outcome of those tariffs. And I think the outcome is impending. You're going to see Japan come to the table, make a deal, move on. The EU come to the table, make a deal, move on. Major African nations, South America, you're going to see Brazil, India. But last will probably be China. And that's, even though it's the biggest one, they want to impose, and I say the plan seems to be to impose max pain upon countries to be able to better negotiate a better deal. And we will see that shortly. So with that, that's all I got. I hope you got some value out of this today. And if you did, hit the subscribe button, like, share, do all those things, and I will see you next time.